The call came in just before dawn. Dr. Evelyn Carter was already awake, sipping bitter coffee in her office when her phone vibrated against the desk. She groaned, rubbing her tired eyes before picking up. Calls at this hour were never good. "Doctor Carter?" she answered, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. The man on the other end spoke in a hurried whisper. "You need to come. It's not normal." Evelyn frowned. "Slow down. What's not normal?" The man inhaled shakily. "The horse. We found it in the salt marsh, near the coast. I've never seen anything like this before." Evelyn stiffened. A horse? Near the marsh? That wasn't just unusual. It was dangerous. The terrain there was treacherous, thick with sucking mud and unpredictable tides. "I'll be there in 20, she said, already pulling on her boots. She called Jake Holloway, her trusted equine specialist, on the way. He answered after the second ring. "Let me guess, weird horse call?" "You got it." Jake sighed. "You need to start charging for these horror shows, Doc. Where are we headed?" "Salt marsh, near the coast," Jake cursed. "That's miles from any stable." "I know," she muttered. "That's what worries me." The drive was cold and quiet, the sky still dark as they sped through the empty countryside. Evelyn felt it creeping in, the unease. A horse lost in the marsh was bad enough, but something told her this was going to be worse, much worse. They arrived just as the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon. The marshland stretched endlessly before them, a damp, ghostly landscape of twisted trees and mist. The salty wind carried the distant cry of gulls. A small group of men stood gathered near the edge of the marsh, their faces pale and tight with unease. One of them, Randy Bishop, a local farmer, stepped forward. Evelyn saw the way his hands trembled. "It's over there," Randy said, pointing toward the reeds. "But, Doc, I don't think you should go near it." She and Jake exchanged glances. That wasn't the kind of thing you told a veterinarian. "Why?" she asked carefully. Randy hesitated. "Just see for yourself." Evelyn and Jake moved through the knee-high grass, boots sinking into the damp earth. And then they saw it. The horse stood completely still, half submerged in the mud. It had once been white, but now it looked like a corpse pulled from the sea. Its entire body was covered in barnacles. Not ticks, not sores, not fungal growths, actual barnacles. Clusters of them, some small, others massive, fused together into grotesque, coral-like formations. Jake swallowed hard. That's not possible?" Evelyn stepped forward slowly. The air smelled wrong, like low tide, salt rot, and something deeper, something stagnant. The horse's breathing was shallow, its eyes dark and glassy. Evelyn crouched beside it, reaching out a careful hand. "Easy, girl," she murmured. "We're here to help you." Her fingers brushed its hide, and something twitched. A barnacle near its shoulder flexed, opening like a tiny mouth. Evelyn yanked her hand back, heart hammering. Jake let out a strangled noise. "Evelyn, it's moving!" They watched in horror as the barnacle clusters shuddered, their surfaces rippling. And then, one of them split open. A thick black liquid seeped from the wound, slow and viscous, like oil. The horse didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't acknowledge the pain at all. It just stood there, its dark eyes fixed on Evelyn, like it was waiting. Evelyn took a step back, her breath catching. What the hell had happened to this animal? Behind them, Randy spoke up again, his voice hushed. "Told you," he whispered. "That thing ain't normal." Evelyn swallowed hard, forcing herself to focus. She was a vet. She had seen strange things before. She had saved dying animals before. This was just another patient, wasn't it? She turned to Jake. "We need to get it out of here, now." Jake nodded, though his face was still pale. "How the hell do we even transport something like this?" Evelyn exhaled sharply, very carefully. But as she turned back to the horse, something cold twisted inside her. Because for a split second, just a split second, she could have sworn it had moved closer, even though its hooves hadn't left the mud, and its mouth had started to open. The rescue was not going as planned. Evelyn's team had arrived with a transport truck, medical supplies, and a reinforced sling, but nothing had prepared them for this. The white horse stood motionless, its skin crawling with living barnacles, its body leaking black, briny liquid. Every now and then, one of the barnacles pulsed, like something was moving inside. Jake shook his head, staring at the grotesque formations covering the horse's flank. "How the hell does a land animal get barnacles?" he muttered. Evelyn had no answer. Her mind raced through every logical possibility: contamination from stagnant water, a severe fungal infection, some undiscovered parasite. But nothing explained this. Nothing explained why the horse wasn't reacting at all. "Let's move quickly," Evelyn ordered. "I don't want to be here after dark." Jake shot her a look, but didn't argue. He felt it too, the wrongness. They secured the harness around the horse's midsection, threading the straps through the steel frame of the hoist. As the team tightened the restraints, the horse remained eerily still. Not a flinch, not a twitch. It was like it wasn't even aware of its own body. Jake signaled the truck. "Okay, let's lift." The winch groaned, and the horse began to rise from the mud. Black fluid dripped from its wounds, staining the damp earth below. Then came the first real sound from the horse, a low, guttural groan. The noise didn't sound right. It wasn't pain. It was something else, something inhuman. Evelyn's hands clenched. That sound didn't belong in this world. And that's when it started to move, not struggle, not panic, but twist. Something beneath its skin began shifting, coiling, rippling. Jake cursed. "Evelyn, what the—" The barnacles on the horse's flank began to open, and something crawled out. A sickening wet squelch filled the air as a thin black tendril pushed its way out of one of the barnacle wounds. It was slick and eel-like, writhing blindly before sinking back into the flesh. Another one appeared, then another. Dozens. They were inside the horse. Jake staggered back, horror twisting his features. "Jesus Christ!" Evelyn's heart pounded against her ribs. "Cut it down! Cut it down now!" The team scrambled, releasing the winch, but before the horse even touched the ground, its head snapped toward them. And it spoke, not in a whinny, not in a scream, but in words. A choked, gurgling whisper that should have been impossible. "It's too late!" The voice wasn't just the horse's, it was layered, like something else was speaking through it. And then it lunged. The horse reared back, stronger than it should have been, its hooves barely scraping the mud before it launched forward. Jake barely dodged in time. The horse collided with the truck, denting the metal with unnatural force. Evelyn stumbled back, heart racing. How was it moving like that? How was it even standing? Then she saw it. The barnacles on its legs were writhing. They weren't just parasites. They were controlling it. Jake scrambled to his feet, reaching for the tranquilizer gun. "Evelyn, get back!" The horse turned its head sharply, snapping its teeth. Black ichor dribbled from its mouth. Jake fired. The dart embedded deep into its neck. The horse froze. Its muscles twitched. Its breathing hitched. And then, it collapsed. The impact sent a shockwave through the earth. For a long moment, silence. Then, something twitched beneath its skin. Evelyn's stomach turned. Whatever was inside it wasn't done yet. No one spoke for a moment. The team stared at the fallen horse, its body still oozing black fluid, barnacles still quivering. Finally, Jake swallowed hard. "Tell me we're not putting that thing on the truck." Evelyn forced herself to take a slow breath. "We have no choice. If we leave it here, it could infect others. We need to get it to the research lab." Jake rubbed his temples. "And then what? Burn it? Because that's what I'd do." Evelyn hesitated. A small, rational part of her agreed. But the scientist in her needed to understand. She looked at the team. "We restrain it. We keep it sedated. We study what's inside it. We find out if there's a way to remove the infection." Jake exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "This is a bad idea, Ev." Evelyn didn't disagree. But as they prepared to load the horse onto the truck, she made the mistake of looking into its half-lidded eyes. And she saw something there, something aware, something waiting. The lab was eerily quiet, too quiet, as Evelyn and Jake wheeled the unconscious white horse into the containment bay. The sterile air smelled of antiseptic, but underneath it lingered the sickly sweet rot of salt and decay. They had driven for hours, the horse restrained, sedated, and bound by reinforced straps. No one spoke during the trip. No one wanted to acknowledge the thing breathing in the truck bed behind them. Now, in the cold fluorescent light of the research facility, Evelyn felt the weight of their mistake. They shouldn't have brought it here. Jake ran a hand through his hair, glancing at the surveillance monitors mounted on the walls. The horse lay in the center of the room, its barnacle-covered body twitching every now and then. "You realize this thing shouldn't be alive, right?" Jake muttered. Evelyn ignored him. She had to focus. They needed samples. They needed data. If this was a disease, a parasite, or something worse, they had to understand it. If they could understand it, they could stop it. She motioned to the team. "Let's begin." The dissection begins. The assistants moved in carefully, clad in hazmat suits and wielding scalpels, forceps, and suction tools. Evelyn held her breath as she made the first incision along the horse's flank. The skin peeled away like wet paper, too soft, too fragile, and what lay beneath was not muscle. It was movement. The barnacles twitched violently, reacting to the intrusion, and something coiled and wriggled inside the open wound. Jake swore under his breath. "Jesus Christ!" Evelyn stumbled back, her hands slick with black gelatinous fluid. Inside the horse were tunnels. Tunnels filled with moving, writhing creatures. Thin, eel-like tendrils slithered through the honeycomb-like caverns, glistening under the surgical light. Some were barely the size of earthworms. Others were as thick as a man's wrist. They were feeding on the horse from the inside out. Then one of them twitched violently. It opened something, like a mouth, and screamed. The noise wasn't just a sound, it was a psychic assault, a violation. Evelyn clutched her head, eyes squeezed shut as the noise scraped against her skull. Jake fell backward, knocking over a tray of instruments. "What the hell is this thing?" The barnacles covering the horse began opening one by one, revealing more of the creatures inside. And then, the horse's body convulsed. It was waking up. "Get out! Now!" Evelyn screamed. But before anyone could move, the straps snapped. The horse's legs buckled, then straightened, like a puppet yanked upright. Its jaw unhinged, stretching unnaturally wide as black fluid poured from its throat. A tangle of slick, eel-like parasites spilled onto the floor, writhing blindly. The assistants ran for the doors. Too late. The horse lunged, moving impossibly fast. Its skin sagged, its muscles twitching as if something else was controlling them. Jake grabbed Evelyn's arm, yanking her backward just as the creature reared up, smashing through the surgical table like it was nothing. One of the assistants screamed as the horse's mouth clamped down on his shoulder. Evelyn watched in horror as the man jerked, convulsed, then fell silent. The parasites poured from the horse's mouth, burrowing into his flesh. He didn't even have time to scream. The horse turned its head toward Evelyn, those unnatural glassy eyes locking onto her. And then, it spoke. "We are not done yet." Jake grabbed the fire axe from the emergency panel and swung it hard. The blade cleaved into the horse's flank, splitting open another grotesque nest of parasites. The horse shrieked, stumbling backward. Evelyn bolted for the containment control panel, slamming the emergency lockdown. Steel doors began sliding down from the ceiling. The horse spasmed, its body contorting as something larger tried to break free. Jake grabbed Evelyn's wrist. "We need to go. Now!" They sprinted down the hall, the overhead lights flickering as the emergency alarm blared. Behind them, the containment door rattled violently. Something was trying to get out. They reached the exit, slamming the security override. The reinforced doors sealed behind them. Evelyn doubled over, gasping for breath. Jake turned to her, his face pale. "Tell me we're burning this place down." Evelyn swallowed hard. She looked back at the thick glass window leading into the containment chamber. The horse, or whatever it was now, stood in the shadows, its barnacle-covered skin pulsating. And then it smiled. A human-like smile stretched too wide. Jake followed her gaze, his hands trembling. "Ev, that thing's not dying, is it?" Evelyn exhaled shakily. "No." She reached for her radio. "Call the incinerator team," she said. "We're burning it, all of it." Jake let out a breath of relief. "Thank God!" But then from the other end of the hallway, something wet crawled across the floor. Both of them turned. The assistant who had been attacked lay motionless, but his mouth was moving, and from within, a tiny black tendril curled its way out, whispering. It's already too late.